Today, we're going to be hearing from our product management leaders at Facebook. They're honored to be here as a part of Women in Product community. Women in Product is core to creating our inclusive community, growing our careers, and ensuring that all women have a place to be heard. So without further ado, I would like to welcome my fellow panelists, Diana and Ashley. Diana Williams is a director of product management at Facebook. She leads business interfaces and organization focused on making meaningful connections between people and businesses. Before Facebook, she was the co-founder and vice president of product at Joyous, where she oversaw the end-to-end customer experience and was responsible for the company's product strategy, user experience, and site design. Prior to joining Joyous, Diana was director of product at eBay, where we actually met. And during her time there at eBay, she created the first vertical experience on eBay.com and led product strategy and feature execution for eBay's $7 billion fashion vertical. Diana also led the merchandising product team, which created eBay's first merchandising algorithm platform and personalization service. She holds a BA from Columbia University, and she and her husband are parents of 3 amazing kids. Welcome, Diana.
Great to be here.
And also with us, we have Ashley. Ashley Yuki is the director of product management at Instagram, and she leads all of Instagram's business, commerce, ads, creator, and discovery product. She joined Facebook in 2013 and has launched and scaled ads, shopping, video, and creator products on Instagram. Welcome, Ashley.
Thanks so much. Thanks for hosting, Yardley, and really excited to be here.
Of course. And then just a quick intro myself. I've been in tech for about 20 years. I'm currently at Facebook, focused on product for small business products and growth team. I just joined in December, so I have a few months in so far. Previous to that, I've been in startups like Trulia, Zillow, and then big companies like Apple, eBay, and Yahoo. And I've been very honored to be part of the Women in Product journey as a co-founder and also now as a board member. So let's dig in. It's been an interesting year for all of us. Obviously, right now we're having a virtual discussion, and for the most part, we've been mostly working virtually the past year. So just to kick us off, what is something that surprised you the most this year, Diana?
Surprisingly, it's how much I've enjoyed this year. I mean, after getting through the full craziness of it, because everyone had to adjust into a new norm, I got to experience so many more, what I would maybe say is stolen moments, even like the pre-nap tantrums. So each night I actually spend every night just being thankful for those moments, the things that I wouldn't normally get to, experience in my day-to-day in a non-COVID world.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I definitely relate to that. We have our 6-year-old in school now and our 3-year-old at home, and having the 3-year-old Mason here and pop in time to time, I definitely cherish those moments as well. How about you, Ashley?
Definitely share that as a nice surprise. I think for me, the most surprising thing, at least from a work perspective, has been how deep of connections I've been able to form and bonds I've been able to form with people that I'm working with very closely, both on my team and cross-functional partners that I've never met in person before. Like if you told me before, I don't know if I would have thought that was possible, but I feel a deep sense of connection and familiarity with people that I've literally never seen in person. Like I had a meeting yesterday where someone made the point that, none of us had ever met in person before. And one of them was like, I don't even know how tall you are. Like, for all I know, you could be really tall. I just never, I've never seen you in person. And I think that's such an interesting realization I think a lot of us are having, that in a totally remote environment, we're able to still form bonds and really build camaraderie.
Yeah, no, that's so true. But the height question comes up a lot. It really does. It's always like, oh, I don't even know how tall you are. I actually,
it's like I have legs. I promise.
I know.
I do.
I actually did stand on my bed the other day just to show people how tall I am, just to get a sense. But yeah, it's been such an interesting year. But even throughout this year, we've been able to really adjust, right? From a leadership perspective, recruiting, bonding with people, like you said, and meeting people. So talk a little bit about leadership. I mean, I definitely think that a lot has changed, but in some ways things have stayed the same. And just want to hear from you first, Diana, about how this year has changed your perspective and how you think about building your team, which is so important to us.
Honestly, I don't think it changed how I think about building my team, but it really amplified important aspects for me in terms of team building. I mean, I focus a lot on diversity of people, skills, perspectives to ensure that we have a really well-rounded team. And especially in a COVID world where maybe you didn't have that, maybe that perspective on your team or a growth mindset, you might actually go and kind of leverage someone else's time and gather someone else's perspective. But those constraints are so much more in COVID. And so really ensuring that your team is well-rounded is important. I would say the other thing that I found is when you're in COVID, it amplified really important PM skills that are so critical for success, like prioritization, leveraging frameworks, because that's not only critical to decide what you're going to emphasize, but really what you're not going to do. We're so tapped out. How do you make sure you're making the right calls, who you're saying no to? And people who aren't doing that really well are struggling more so that I'm seeing in COVID. Another thing is a broad and purposeful communication toolkit. You can't always be in meetings. So how is your written communication? When do you have one-on-one? How are you hitting those right moments to land messages or strategies or make key decisions? And then the last aspect is really scrappiness and flexibility. Everything isn't at your fingertips. Sometimes staying closer to the customer is harder. And so having people that can think outside of the box to solve problems and address needs, I think is pretty important. And so although maybe it didn't change much, it amplified those traits. And so they become a really critical aspect in terms of the interview process and ensuring the right people land in the right roles.
Yeah, and I definitely hear that. I mean, I think especially on the communication toolkit side, like, you know, it's not easy to just pull people together like for a brainstorm or something anymore. And just, you know, today I was thinking through about a brainstorm workshop where, you know, it requires asynchronous and synchronous during the session. And during the asynchronous piece, you don't want people just to be sitting in front of video, like doing something by themselves for 30 minutes. So it just causes a lot more thoughtfulness about communication and how to make it very effective, and leverage all the toolkits we have. So I think that is.
And one thing on that too, Yardley, I was like, a great example that I always tell people is like, think about if you write a highlight, email or post at the end of your week, think about how many you read. And so if you read a whole bunch at the end of it and you're like, wait, do I know what just happened? What's the most important thing? What should I know? And so really making communication so crisp in this time, I think is really important.
That is true. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So to talk a little bit more about the distributed remote environment, there's another aspect which is also around like building a team culture and a sense of belonging, especially with so many people onboarding right now in this environment and have never met in person, like you mentioned, Ashley, earlier. How do you think that we can best do this, and how have we been able to foster the team culture still and sense of belonging?
It's such an important question. I think we've all been asking ourselves over the past year. And I think my biggest learning from our experience at Instagram has been just be nimble and just rapid trial and error, and be willing to try new things and see what sticks, because none of us know what's going to work. So some examples, in case they're helpful, hot tips if other people want to try them for their own organizations. One that's worked out for us pretty well so far is for onboarding. Normally what we do is when people join, we all get together physically in a room. There's a bunch of presentations, and people get a sense of the company in that way. Obviously, we can't do that. And so one thing we've been playing with is just having different leaders within the company record videos on their phone. So it feels a little bit more kind of intimate and personal, like a personal welcome, and having that be kind of like a scaled way to feel that sort of the sense of culture and welcome when you first join. Another one that's one of my favorite ones that we've tried is, and this might be harder for other folks to do an internal channel, but I guess you could create a private Instagram account, is we do a weekly Q&A with our leads, and we've been using our own live products for that. So for Instagram, our head of Instagram, Adam Asseri, will go live on Instagram. And one of the things that's really cool is we've always had this tradition of weekly Q&As, but it's made it almost feel more like a sense of community even than pre-COVID. Because pre-COVID, we'd be getting together in a room and it would be like Adam talking to the whole company, and every once in a while someone stands up to ask a question. But now with live, there's just this active conversation that's happening in the comments, and there's a lot more, fun, lighthearted trolling of each other. There's just like a lot more, it just feels like a much more tight-knit community, and there's more of a back and forth and an interactivity to it. And we get to dog food our live products. So things like that, I think have been really pleasant surprises. And again, I think the lesson is just trial and error. Just try a bunch of things, and you never know what's going to stick, because we're all exploring this new world pretty fresh together.
I do like the IG Live idea. I mean, it makes it for very engaging, right? Because you see the comments live and all the hearts that like bubbles up. That's pretty cool. I like that. Yeah. So how about onboarding tips then, aside from talking about culture, especially like onboarding new members right now? Diana, like what are some thoughts on that?
Yeah, onboarding, in our current environment where almost the whole entire team is remote can be really challenging. And so I do think having reference materials is great, an onboarding doc or a ramp plan, but making it a collaborative doc that both you and a member of your team can kind of contribute to, and creating a broader support network. Because everyone isn't in an office environment, getting help, or if someone's in other meetings, becomes challenging. So do they have multiple people, both within their team, as you as a manager, other mentors that they can go to get more real-time feedback as it comes? Other areas is just sharing feedback, as it comes, finding ways to create a safe space. It's never easy when you're in a remote and you're building a new relationship, but find light ways that you can do that. But I found the most important thing is setting expectations. And in many instances, it's just grounding expectations. Think about it. We're PMs. What do? We love to build strategy, execute, move forward, unblock things. It's part of our DNA. And when you're not doing it, you're almost twitching. Am I not delivering enough? But really in the beginning, it's creating space to build a strong foundation. Get that background, get that understanding so they can really do their job well. If they started doing all of that right out the gate, it's not built on anything, and they might be making the wrong choices and the wrong calls. And so giving that safe space for someone to really ramp into the role, nailing those first couple things so that trajectory is really right.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. I mean, I think there is a lot around like letting others help, be mentors, be buddies to support you and the person that's onboarding. I think that setting expectations is really good. I love like when I first started, when you talked about like a curve, and you share that with me, just like the milestones, like first is like meeting people, then second is around, learning the product. And I think that setting expectations early and often along the way is definitely key during this time. Yeah. I think another element that's also made it really interesting during this time for me personally, as I've onboarded, obviously at Facebook during this remote times, is just being able to have some ad hoc meetings and mimic some of the things that I do in real life. So for instance, Wednesday mornings, I try to have meetings later and ad hoc ping people to see if they want to grab a coffee. So it mimics my grabbing coffee in person, but it's more like virtually, and people are just always surprised by it. But it just really mimics real life, right? So then it doesn't make me feel like, oh, I yet have another meeting on my calendar. It's more just like what I've done in person. So trying to do more of that, I think, has also been helpful, like at least onboarding during this time to mimic some of the in-person stuff. Talking about remote environment a little bit more and how we're like communicating with one another is so real. Video conference fatigue, and how it's just been really hard, for all of us kind of just to sit here all day and be on like video. How have you been able to find ways to manage, Ashley, during this time and still foster effective communication?
This is one we've been talking about a lot at Instagram. It's funny, we went through a little bit of like a journey here at Instagram when the pandemic first started. We went on this huge campaign to say, like, how do we cut down meeting time? This is a good opportunity to cut down meeting time because, we were all starting to feel that being on camera for meetings was feeling more draining to us than just being live in real life in person for meetings. with each other, which I think a lot of people, it's like a shared experience that we're all having. And then somewhere along the way, especially as, you know, a bunch of COVID trends started emerging and we had to shift work and reprioritize, a bunch of those meetings started piling back on. And we had to have this conversation again of, okay, well, we can't actually sustainably, now that we know this is going to be, you know, for the long haul, at least a year, probably, we have to figure out how we're going to still meet. Like we can't not meet, but we have to figure out how to lower that drain on ourselves. And so one of the things that we've tried to normalize as a team norm within my organization is just being more flexible with going on video mute, which sounds like an obvious thing, but I do think it's something that you have to kind of decide as an organization is going to be a norm to normalize it. So it's not like you're the one weird person that why aren't you showing your face? And so we've tried to just talk a lot about it a lot more. Like, what are the situations in which you can do a video mute meeting? So sometimes it's, you know, if you know you're not going to be an active participant, there are moments in maybe a group meeting that you can take an opportunity to video mute while you need to eat your lunch or whatever you might need to do, just rest, you know, not have to stress about how you look on a camera. Another one is if you have a recurring one-on-one series with someone that you know this is something you can do, you can just call out in the meeting invite, this is going to be a walking one-on-one. And then you kind of go into that both knowing you have that time set aside. That's going to be a time where you can go walk your dog or just go for a stroll or just get some fresh air and still be able to have that one-on-one. And you've set the norm up front so it doesn't feel like you're, you know, violating anything. But again, I think it's important that we are talking about these things at an organization level because I think you have to sort of normalize it.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, Diana, I don't know if you have anything to add to this one, but I definitely am a strong believer on the walking one-on-one, especially in the afternoon. I've actually found it so that I don't need another cup of coffee, like in late afternoon. It's actually like if I'm able to just do the walk and like be able to be on my phone while I get a little bit of my blood flow going, it just also helps break up the day as well.
And as corny as it is, sometimes just switching rooms or working outside,
That's
like
so
just
true.
the fresh air alone. Everyone's like, where are you traveling? I was like, no, I just went to my backyard. And that was just the little boost that you need throughout the day.
Yeah, it's very true. I love all these tips. Yeah, so one of the things at Facebook, you know, I've really recognized as I've been onboarding myself the last few months, is just a whole notion of really staying connected. It's not just a mission that we talk about like outwardly, but we really do practice it ourselves within Facebook. So what are some ways that you've been able to go and do about, you know, staying connected with your team, organization, and most importantly, continue to bring your best self to work on an everyday basis?
Yeah, so on that one, I think it's really interesting. Staying connected doesn't necessarily mean just being more video time. It's being connected to your team, understanding what their needs are, what's most important. And for me, what I've really found, it's almost barbelled. It's people that there's half of, you know, our team that are like, please, we just want more time. Let's hang out. Can we do video happy hours? Let's kind of get together. And then I have a bunch of other people who might have like kids. And when they're not in meetings, they're trying to squeeze in like helping prep for a test or double checking an assignment or, you know, making food and dinner. And there's a lot of differences. And so I think the first thing to recognize in staying connected is what does your team need? What do the people and your peers around you need? Because then you can respond in those right ways. In a COVID world, tight connections is sometimes harder. It's really hard to have a large organizational all hands and build the close connections. That's great for information dissemination. But in those instances, having small breakouts at the end where smaller groups get together, or for smaller team moments, maybe a large team happy hour or a get together isn't the right thing, but just a small group of 5 or 6 people and creating those opportunities is great. You know, smaller chat threads that are for social aspects that people can choose to be a part of versus it flooding other arenas. I have found to be helpful and flexes across the extremes that I'm seeing across our team. Now, I would say bringing your best self to work is a completely different story. For this, I'd really ask every person, like I asked myself, is what do you need to fuel your soul? What gives you balance? What sustains you? I mean, for me, it's running. I believe that's also true for both of you ladies. Yeah, it is. You know, even when I'm getting crazy at home, my husband's like, please just go for a run. Please save us all right now. And for me, what feeds my soul is running, cooking, and my family. Yeah. And so that's why all those little stolen moments that I get to come out and I get to give the kids a hug from after school or the tantrum in the middle of the day, it actually fuels the soul along with the run. And so everyone should really spend time thinking about that. And if balancing is hard, have the conversation with your manager. I tell everyone on my team, if you want to put that item on your personal goals for the half, just so you can write, I'm going for a run in the middle of your calendar, feel free. Because this is the thing that's really going to help someone kind of show up as their best self, day in and day out, regardless of what environment they're in right now. And then one little point is no one's a mind reader. And when you're in person, sometimes you can feel dynamics. And over VC, just feeling something is sometimes a little harder. So remember, we each have a voice. Use that voice. Sometimes you might just say, I need to check out a little early, or, hey, can we do this as a walking one-on-one? That will really help. And so make sure it's a two-way conversation and being connected.
No, it's so true.
That.
I love that. I mean, my peers and I, started something, and I cannot take credit for this. Someone suggested it, where we're holding ourselves accountable to doing a marathon in our own pace. Of course, I run, so then it's like, okay, I can track my running miles. But some folks are like actually turning into like doing push-ups in 26.2 increments instead of like 26.2 miles. And so I think it's just like maybe also finding some activities like this to make togetherness has also been fun, just to kind of have something to talk about outside of work and keep us all on the same page. But it's been fun actually to track it throughout April. I wonder, Ashley, that since you talk about IG Live, do you and your team tend to use like IG Live or something like that to then like stay connected?
Well, we use it, like I mentioned, for that kind of weekly touch point for sure at an Instagram Live level. And then we will sometimes use it for team level live check-ins.
I definitely use that. Okay, cool. Yeah, I do.
But we're all over the place with different VC solutions. We're trying them all right now.
No, I love it. Okay. So switching gears a little bit, we all do product management. And, a lot of what we do every day is thinking about how we're going to really create solutions to solve problems that we're very passionate about. And part of it is really being close to the users and our customers. And right now, when the times have changed, can you give an example, Ashley, on how the current times have changed the way you or your team have built a product, especially when the user needs are changing so rapidly?
Yeah, I definitely have lots of examples here. I do think, being similar to kind of our earlier conversation around team culture and being nimble and being willing to try things. I think in this environment, we've also had to be very nimble from a product standpoint and from a prioritization standpoint. To Diana's point earlier, prioritization being a really important PM skill, that's a core PM skill, but it's ever more important right now because the world's shifting from out from under us and we have to be ready to react, but not in a way that isn't kind of true with our sort of North Star strategy. So for us, some of those things that emerged on Instagram pretty early on in the pandemic, so March, April timeframe, we were starting to see some trends. One was the surge in live usage. I talked about we use live for Instagram Q&As. Also, just the world was using Instagram Live a lot more. And I think it's because it's deeply a part of the human condition to want to feel connected. And live was just this way that the world could still feel together while we were apart. And we were seeing that in our data, just big spikes in live usage. And so we, our teams moved some things around to reprioritize, to fast track some work that we had planned for live that was just ever more important right now to meet this moment when people needed it most. So things like being able to go with live with more than one person. People like to use live as a conversation. So now you can go live with up to 4 people as opposed to just 2, which was what it was as we started COVID. And being able to, as a creator, have your fans buy badges in your live experience. That's something that, a lot of creators at this time are, having to figure out new ways to make a living. For a lot of them, their livelihood is presence. And so we rapidly scrambled and launched a product that we had planned to do, but we just accelerated the timelines to meet the moment. which is this badges product where you as a fan can buy badges to support a creator that you're watching live. The other big one that that really has been something that we've been reacting to and being nimble with is just the shift in general from activity shifting from offline to online, particularly shopping, where, you know, obviously we can't do things in person as much anymore. And again, this was a trend that was happening, but it just got accelerated and compressed. And so a lot of our timelines also got accelerated and compressed. So we launched a shops product, which is a way for any brand to create a digital storefront across Facebook and Instagram in a really easy way to meet their customers where they are, which is online now. And then also, you know, more people are making purchase decisions than ever before without physically holding a product in their hand. So how do we uniquely help make that experience better? And we launched a shop tab on Instagram as part of this, accelerating that plan and really bringing in different elements like creators that you trust who can give you recommendations on products, more context, you know, video lives and how-tos, tutorials that help you really experience a product, so you can have more confidence in a purchase decision without physically holding the product in your hand. These are the kinds of things that, you know, were part of our strategy, but we fast-tracked them given the moment.
No, I'm totally smiling as you're talking about the shops tab and creators, because I'm one of those big fan of yours and your products, because I actually discovered recently a plum oil for my face that was actually recommended through one of the shops in Instagram.
Yes. Is that the one that Chrissy Teigen uses? I feel like that plum one has been trending. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It is. I don't know how it showed up in my feed, but it did. And then there was like a creator talking about it. I don't know who she was, but her skin looked amazing. So I had to like buy and try it. Now it's sold out. I'm on the wait list. So anyway, so I'm a big fan of this plum oil that I discovered through Instagram products.
I've heard great reviews of it.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I definitely agree. You know, when times are changing so fast, just being nimble is key. And I think another example, you know, what I've seen is definitely our focus on SMBs. Like you mentioned, creators is like all around helping them with their livelihood, especially as soon as COVID hit. And similar token, you know, on the SMB side, we started with like COVID grant and educational hub, but then quickly really creating products that, you know, are helping these SMBs like not only like survive, but hopefully thrive during this time around like creating opportunities for them to connect with customers like they never can, you know, before, and making it very seamless and easy for them to do so. And it still remains a huge area of focus for us today. And I do think that a lot of it is like what you said, where it's not like brand new ideas all the time per se, but it's just really expedited, you know, what you really thought that you had to do to bring things like online from offline, for instance, and just making sure that we're doing a speed that really caters to like the users and the customers during this time. I think like a lot of us in product not only think about user needs and product development and, you know, ideation, but also just strategy in general. And one key aspect of being a product leader is the ability to really form a robust product strategy that, you know, not only stays around, but and evolves, but also the team buys into, and that everyone's very excited about. And during this current time of change, you know, a lot of questions I hear from PMs is, how do you stay, you know, on task and focus on a strategy that is like 3 to 5 or maybe 10 years out, you know, when things are changing so fast? Has it been easier or more difficult to form like strategic directions right now? And I would just love to hear from you, Diana, on this one.
Yeah, on this, you know, I think what's really important is, you know, the elements of the strategy are really important, right? To get for people to come along on that ride. And you can't skip aspects. Like, what really is the problem? Who is it a problem for? You know, what are the industry? What does the competitive landscape look like? What does success look like? But both from use cases of today versus use cases of tomorrow, or some type of assessment framework. And then those strategic investments, the goals, what are those risks, and like an operating plan. Because without all of that on how you're going to execute on it, how is just as important as the what. And so when you marry those together, you have the plan. And a lot of times where I see gaps is you're shortchanging this process. You're saying like, oh, I'm just going to tell you what my solution is. Well, what's the problem? Or maybe you really identified the problem and the who, but you really didn't nail what are the important use cases. Which ones should we be executing on first? So spending time to make sure your strategy is thoughtful and thorough. But it's in COVID, that might be the easier aspect. Bringing people along is the harder one. Socializing it, getting feedback. So build in that buffer. You need to do it through one-on-ones. You send it, in just a document, and people share feedback, ask questions along the way. Spending time sharing early and often is very critical. But for you as a product leader, right, times are changing. Times are going to change again in 6 months and 3 months. So the idea that a strategy is set is the incorrect way to look at the world. The strategy should always be evolving based on new information that you're getting. And so you should be looking at your strategy all the time and refreshing it probably quarterly and every half based on the new information that you're doing. And so strategies become stale because you as the product leader maybe might not be keeping it up to date. Or maybe the best thing to do is to move away because you've got new information. And maybe that strategy now with the new data you have, you need to actually create a different one.
That is so true. And I don't think you can emphasize that enough, right? Like a strategy is forever evolving based upon new information. It needs to be refreshed. And I think that's one of the pitfalls that I often see in product leaders that are maybe a little bit earlier on in their experience and strategy, is that they don't have that mindset that it needs to evolve and change and constantly be updated, and then getting to buy in again with all the stakeholders as it is evolving, right? So that everyone can move in the same page.
And just think about that collaboration with some of those partners. They might have other information. You shouldn't feel bad that your strategy is evolving based on new information and partnership from teams. That's helping make your strategy stronger. And so really those reach outs aren't for the hand clap. It's like, wow, what haven't I thought of? What else should I know? And having that perspective changes the way you engage with both, your customers, the people that you're working with, but also all of your partner teams.
Yeah, I love that point so much. I feel like it's so important as product leaders for us to be, in order for this to succeed at this, to be willing to question our own assumptions. For that to really be a truly living, breathing thing, like nothing is precious. And I think the best product strategists, I agree, see every opportunity, every moment of dissent as an opportunity to learn something, to say, what am I missing? What have I overlooked? What new information do I have now that might change the way I'm approaching this?
And actually, to that point, there's so many people I come in, I go, we're PMs, we're product managers. We have a job, not because everything's easy, not for the handshakes. It's because everything has a cost benefit analysis. Everything has a trade-off. Everything needs prioritization, right? And so that is our role. And so if you're actually coming at it as a different angle, that it's an easy decision or just the thumbs up, then you should look harder to see what haven't I assessed in what we're putting forward.
It's so true. And I just think through that kind of practice, you just grow a much thicker skin. You definitely want your output to not be perfect all the time, and that you're open to feedback and criticism, because ultimately there are probably a lot of blind spots that you don't see, and as times are changing, the strategy needs to change and the plans need to change. So yeah, I love this so much. As I talked a little bit about, with strategy, it's a lot about giving confidence to a team too, that this long-term strategy will stick or evolve over these times. And I think it's been another question that I've heard a lot from PMs is how do you then not only do all this work around getting a strategy, out and running and getting all the socialization and buy-in, but then how do you then give the confidence to the team to trust in this strategy and actually operationalize against it? Ashley, did you have any perspective on this one?
Yeah, I do. I think so. I think there's a difference between sort of long-term view on sort of what are the problems that are worth solving that you and your organization think are important to prioritize, and then there's the deeper level strategy details that I agree with Diana and Yardley, this conversation we're having, which is a lot of that needs to evolve and it will be nimble. But a lot of the time, your sort of North Star of why is this worth doing? I think, one of the things that I've realized actually through this pandemic is actually surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, but that actually hasn't shifted all that much. In fact, if anything, a lot of that has accelerated. So to give you some concrete examples, this trend of user activity, especially shopping activity, shifting from offline to online. That was already happening. The importance of, and why this is worth doing, it's important for us to support small businesses through that transition. And we think we're uniquely positioned to provide them tools in lots of cases, free tools that allow them to make that shift offline to online to meet their customers where they are. That's not new with the pandemic, but the urgency and the acceleration around it, the details of that strategy have definitely evolved given the COVID details. Another example for us at Instagram is creators. I've talked about that a bit. But it was always something that we knew that was important. One of the best things we can do for creators and for fans is to help them connect deeply on our platform and directly. And then as a result of that, help creators make a living doing that so they can actually sustain that as a livelihood. Not right. New, but COVID made it much more important because more than ever before, they're having to connect on our platforms because they can't do so in person in real life. And creators are having to figure out new innovative ways to make a living because a lot of their normal ways of doing it in the real analog world are not possible with COVID. So I think one thing that I always kind of question myself, I don't know if you've ever, either of you've ever read the Jim Collins book, Good to Great, but a lot of people have read it. Anyway, he has this framework, which he calls them your hedgehogs. And he has this theory, not getting too much into it, that the companies that are able to actually go good to great, and he's done a bunch of the research is actually, it's a pretty solid methodology, looked at this, and the organizations that are able to make that leap tend to have what he's called a hedgehog, which is like they understand what they can be best at. And his thesis is that it's basically this intersection of three things. It's what you're most passionate about, what can drive your economic engine, and what you uniquely can do best. And I think you can have personal hedgehogs, you can have organizational hedgehogs, but for me, like this, meeting in my world, at least in my product group at Instagram, meeting the needs of small businesses as they make this shift from offline to online, helping creators find their unique set of super fans and make a living doing what they do best, which is whatever their craft is, and providing that to their consumers. Like those are our hedgehogs. Those are things that we're passionate about. There's no reason we should be the best at them. And they can fuel our economic engine. So I think having some way to ground yourself in sort of the higher level, long-term, why is this the thing that's worth doing, I think is helpful in staying in a time like this when the details, again, of the strategy are definitely constantly evolving.
Yeah, no, I love that framework. I'm gonna have to read that book. I mean, that definitely resonates with me.
Classic. I highly recommend it.
Yay. On that point too, which is, there are things that in COVID, that simple narrative, right? Those key elements, that is much easier to resonate with people. They remember it off the cuff and they can refer to the other context. And so people spending time focused on that, communicating that, sometimes is enough to keep that flywheel going, even through some of those bumpier moments.
Yeah, that's true. I love this discussion so far. I mean, I might be biased, but yeah, I'm learning a lot myself.
Me too.
Okay, so aside from, work and leadership, product strategy, a lot of it, being a leader is to also take good care of ourselves so that we can set good examples for our team on how they can take good care of themselves. And during this, times of change definitely becomes a lot more top of mind. And so just love to hear, I guess, first from Ashley around how do you take care of yourself right now? That is not really just for the day-to-day, but thinking about sustaining it on a long-term performance basis, and just how has COVID or this past year changed your perspective on that?
Yeah, I definitely think this takes me back to one of the points Diana was making earlier, which is I think it's so important for all of us to figure out what personally fuels us, and it will be different for each of us. For me, personally, Diana also mentioned this: physical fitness, exercise, spending time with loved ones. This is one of the nice side benefits of COVID is I haven't been able to travel, so I've had more time with my new baby niece. And that's energizing to have that kind of family time. One of the things this also makes me think of, I read an article recently. I'm also part of this, we call it a lifelong learning group. One of my former professors from the university I went to kind of organizes this set of curriculum for us, and we self-organize into small groups, and we just kind of meet bi-weekly to do lifelong learning. And one of the readings last week was talking about how you balance your work priorities and your personal priorities and making sure you're staying fueled. And it made this point, which I really loved, which is it said something to the effect of, if someone says they don't have time for something, that doesn't mean they don't have time for it. It just means they're not prioritizing it. They're not willing to prioritize it. And it kind of broke down the math. It made this point, which I had never thought about it this way, but because it's easy to say I just don't have time. There's so many other things I have to do. It made this point. It was okay, well, you have I don't know, I'm not gonna be able to do the math off the top of my head. I think it's like 168 hours in a week. And if you spend, 7 hours a night sleeping and then, I don't know, roughly 50, 60 hours on work, you still have, something like 50 plus hours left every week that you can allocate the way you want to. And for some reason, that just unlocks something in my mind. I'm like, yeah, I should be really much more intentional about making sure I'm guardrailing some of that time for my personal refuel things like exercising and time with loved ones, things like that. So that was a fun little, this question just makes me think of that kind of realization I had the past week.
No, that's like super helpful. I mean, I know Diana, like you have like 3 kids and we definitely have talked even in our past conversations around taking good care of ourselves. Like what are some of your thoughts about how you're making it work right now for you and your family and for yourself?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I never really bought into, and I'm sorry for everyone who's a big fan of this, but work-life balance. It doesn't exist. My family's always there, and that is true of my youngest kids to my crazy extended family, back east. And so for me, it's been all about integration because I also love my job, and there's elements where I really want to throw myself into aspects of it. And so as well as like the things that fuel my soul, and I want to make sure that's carved out. And so COVID definitely, and working remote took things to a whole nother level. And in some ways, it really brought me more close to the people that I work with. I have done product reviews while making my kids' lunches. This past week, much to the dismay of probably our leadership team, my 2-year-old waddles in the sleep sack after, and woke up from his nap because he took a stinky and he had to let the whole group know that. And so I said, okay, so being the good mom, computer, laptop on the other, baby on the other, I go to change him, but I forgot to turn the video off. So we continue to have the call. I'm giving feedback, as I'm changing my son's diaper. And the aspect of that it's amazing is everyone that I'm there is struggling with different aspects. We've all kind of brought, who we are to the table more. We've allowed for that flexibility. We've brought in the open communication to support each other. And so that is one thing that, how have I balanced? It's actually just being vulnerable to the way that life is. I probably was more stressed about it or felt exhausted. Today I'm having a good mom day. Today I had a good work day. And now they're just all so infused on a deeper level that I'm finding better balance in some ways because I've actually been okay with the reality of what we have to juggle and those hard choices. And I would really love to kind of get more info on the extra hours and how to better prioritize that time because it's true. I've actually been more purposeful about it without actually kind of doing whatever this extended learning is or lifelong learning. But I think being purposeful, spending time doing this allowed me to kind of lean more into aspects of work and my family in ways that I actually feel better about the balance that I'm bringing. And it wasn't easy in the beginning, but being okay with having those vulnerable moments or saying like, I got to run out for a doctor's appointment and just being open to stuff, I thought has been really helpful. And it allowed other people in our org to start doing the same. And so it might have even adapted the new norm.
Yeah, I think those things definitely resonate with me too. I mean, I think it's like, time management is everything. I've said probably for the last 5 years now, like time is the only currency that I cannot invent more of. And so I am really precious about how I spend my time. And so I do think it's important to prioritize. And then secondly, making like work-life integration work. I think the only other thing that I have found from a well-being perspective during this time is just also being able to mentally like challenge myself to like unplug, from not just work, but just from devices as much as possible because we talk about video fatigue, all day long. And that's something that I feel like has helped if I'm like consciously making an effort to go like read a book that maybe is no longer like on a digital device, like an actual physical book, or like go play a music instrument or go do a puzzle or something that I think it's definitely new during this time in that like we're always like facing screens, all day long. And I feel like that has helped like just unplug a little bit from devices, and my mind's able to just relax a bit more. And like if I can like play some music that I like at the same time of doing these activities, then it just makes it even better. But yeah, so anyways, I mean, we've had a lot of great conversations around these various different topics. And as you know, we started talking in the beginning, you know, part of this discussion is really helping women leaders, especially like during this current times of change. And wondering if you have any advice that you would particularly want to, you know, really get out there for like women leaders today, especially those that might be new to it, and also like maybe new to it in a remote environment as well.
Yeah, I mean, mine is, you know, being a woman leader is super powerful. I think there's a lot of times where I'm in environments and it's kind of more framed in a loss framing than an opportunity framing. I've always viewed it as an opportunity. What is the perspective that I have that no one else can bring? What is the ways that I engage, you know, differently than other people? How can I support? How can I add value? And so just remember that, you know, we are all powerful. And this is part of the element. I grew up, everyone has an amazing trait about themselves, you know, and every person does, every person that you work with. And so continue to do that to bring your best self, but also to help elevate those around you. Help them recognize it when they're missing it. Or sometimes they're just too tired and they need that extra support.
Yeah. Ashley?
I love that, Diana. It's just so powerful and so important to keep reminding ourselves that. I love that. I totally second that one. I think what I'd add on to it, I would just say support each other. I think we as women, like, you know, these kinds of conversations that we're having here, I think help us, you know, support each other in finding our own unique power. And I know for myself, I have like a self-organized small group of senior female PMs at Facebook that I get together with, just to, you know, sometimes it's just to like connect on life. It's not even, we don't even talk about work. Sometimes we have real talk about, you know, real work things that we can help support each other through, lots to learn from each other. I think just, it's such a special thing to be able to create those kinds of safe spaces. And I think there's something special as women that we share as product leaders, you know, things that we go through that, can just kind of foster those bonds. So I just say like, really lean into supporting each other. I think there's a lot we can learn from each other. And I'm learning a lot through this conversation.
Me too.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, well, thank you, ladies. I can't believe an hour already went by. Like hours. Okay, well, thank you for joining me. This is wonderful. And thank you for the team that's like really help us along the way to make this event possible. And thanks for everyone for tuning in. Talk to you all soon. Bye.
Bye.